not winning 90% of your new business because you have some sort of incredible value.
I'm going to take a bit of a different angle.
We got a budget this big. I'm going to give it to you because you have a really killer plan.
You give a Red Bull to a turtle, what do you expect?
I think that's a dead turtle. So let's move on to...
E-Rig.
Cheers.
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 Does your current premium finance company lock you into long-term agreements? That's because they don't want you talking to us. At IFS, we win your business the good old-fashioned way, with customer service. I know you don't always have to use a premium finance company, but when you do, you should use IFS. Cheers.
Hi there, and welcome to the Digital Insurance Pint podcast. I'm your host, Tom Reed, and as always, I'm joined by my colleagues, Adam Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell & Whale, Steve Earle, CEO of Cheap Insurance, and Jeff Roy, CEO of Excalibur Insurance. And today we are pleased to be joined by Colin Simpson, who is the CEO of the Insurance Brokers Association of Ontario. And I think a lot of folks know you, Colin, and thanks very much for joining the show. I'm going to get Jeff to jump in and do our little speed round here. But before we do that, I want to, on behalf of the crew here, give a big shout out to our season 3 sponsor, IFS Premium Finance. And as most of our listeners know, all the proceeds from the DIPP go to WIC. So good cause all around. And I'm going to shut up with the advertisements and let Jeff jump right into our speed round. Jeff, over to you.
Hey, great. Thanks, Tom. Colin, thanks for being on the show. It's nice to be on a meeting that we're not actually working on a big issue. So have a little bit of fun and talk about things, right? So we're going to start the speed round off with a few questions just so all our listeners get to know you. And again, everybody in Ontario knows you quite well, but we have some people right across Canada and the US. And we just want to unpack who Colin Simpson is. So who's your favorite Canadian band or musician?
Seriously?
You have one? We're gonna go worldwide now. The other option is we can go worldwide. Who's your favorite?
Worldwide, yeah. I would, yeah. That's probably the David Bowie.
David Bowie, nice. Yeah. All right.
I got a picture of him on the wall.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. Great, yeah. Some classics, some Ziggy Stardust. There we go. David Bowie.
There he is.
Great artist. Your favorite sport?
Rugby.
Really nice.
Haven't played it for many years. The one I play the most is probably skiing.
Oh, good. Yeah. I've had a few chats with you when you're driving back from the ski hill, so it's good. I think was your son or daughter. One of them was a skier, right? Was on the ski
both
team.
of them are. Both of them raced. My son stopped racing when he was 16 and became an instructor, but my daughter's still racing.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, they haven't been to Steve's ski shop yet. We need to go to there.
No, choice between beer or wine. What's your preference?
Depends on the day, mainly wine.
And now, are you an iPhone or an Android user?
Yeah, my son's the Android user, and if anything ever goes wrong with technology, he always blames Apple.
And our last question. When COVID is over, what's the one place you're going to rush out and travel to first?
The UK. I'm going to go back and see my family.
Great. That's the end of the speed round. I'll pass it back to you, Tom.
We'll let you introduce yourself here, Colin. I think a lot of folks know you, but maybe talk about how did you become the IBAO CEO?
Yeah, so I've been in insurance. I'm actually a CA, so a chartered accountant by trade. I got into insurance about 25 plus years ago in the UK. You can probably tell from the accent. I've been here in Canada for 20 years, and I am Canadian. I got involved. I've always been involved with brokers throughout my whole career. And I got involved with the IBAO after coming out from being the CEO of Kingsway Financial. I set up a tech company, and just as we were selling that, I bumped into the then CEO of IBAO, and he asked me to set up a telematics strategy for brokers in Canada through the IBAO. So I did that for about a year and a half. Came out of doing that, and we're starting to do some other strategic projects in the insurance industry. And then there were some management changes at the IBO, and I stepped in as the interim CEO. Stepped back out again when another CEO was appointed, and that didn't work out. So I came back in again. Because there were so many challenges, I offered to stay for 2 or 3 years, and here we are 4 years on, and I'm still here.
Great. Colin, I'm going to throw over to Steve, who is obviously not a member of the IBAO, and see what Steve has to say. Go ahead, Steve.
You mentioned advocacy and stuff like that, and Tom mentioned, so I'm not from Ontario. First of all, I do want to thank IBAO for a lot of the work that you do trickles down and benefits us in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Atlantic Canada, and out west. So you guys do a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to advocacy and stuff like that, and we follow your lead. So thank you. When you talk about IBAO adding value to business and the advocacy piece, when we bring in technology to that equation, how are we advocating, or how are our associations advocating? Are we doing a good job on a national level advocating on what we need with respect to technology, be it BMSs, connectivity, and so on? And I'll use an example, Colin, of where you guys have been awesome. Is there was a ultimate change that happened really quick, and that was paperless was getting launched, with or without us, and that horse was quickly headed for the. In fact, a couple of the horses were already out, and you organized. Let's jump in and start to corral them before they go crazy here. So again, thank you for that. But that's just one example of the things that I'd like to touch on with respect to all the stuff that's going on with connectivity, the way insurers are giving us things, the way BMSs aren't, and so on.
It is very difficult to coordinate activity that is in alignment with so many different businesses unless you work at it hard. So, one of the things we've been doing over the last few years even is on the technology front, making sure that we understand who people are in the industry, who to talk to, and who you need to speak to on specific subjects. So that if we do have a problem or a perceived problem coming up in front of us, then we know who to get around the table. So that's something we're doing in, the Going Paperless. We know who to get around the table. We know who, the influencers are. We know who the decision makers are within each company. We know who the brokers that we need to get on the calls to be influential, so that when we actually strike a position, people pay attention and take notice of it. It doesn't mean that when you do something in a coordinated fashion, you get a coordinated result. Because if you imagine you've got, the 100 insurance companies and the 600, brokers, they're all in a race. They're all, driving different cars on different ponies. I always use an analogy, and it confuses some people that, horses for courses. Some people get that, some people don't. And they always ask me, what the hell does that mean? But you get your thoroughbred racehorses, and then you get your donkeys. You don't put the donkeys in a race course with the thoroughbreds.
Are you calling Steve a donkey? Is that what's happening here? You're right. I did get confused. I was lost.
Is there a better way to be proactive in the sense of getting in there at the table somehow when these decisions are being made?
Yeah, I always love having conversations with people who like to tell others how to spend their money. It's their money. They can do what they like with it. But because it's so diverse, it's not easy to nail it all. So yeah, it would be great if we had a say in what the insurance companies did with technology and their billions across the industry. But it doesn't always work that way. And each company is out of step with each other. So, they're in a different cycle. So you talk about Duck Creek or Guidewire. I mean, the guys that started Guidewire a few years back, there's others that are just starting the project now. Some of the ones that have been most successful aren't the ones you would have expected to have been most successful. The great shiny toy that was expected to be delivered out of things like Guidewire hasn't been delivered. So, expectations and things shift as we go forward. The market shifts. Consolidation happens at the insurance company level. So we have to deal with all of this stuff. But the easy answer is for us to continue to talk to each other, figure out where we need to go collectively as brokers, and to continue to put the stakes in the ground, and you'll get people down the path. You won't get them all, back to the horse race. You're not going to get them all across the line at the same time. You may find the donkeys having more fun than the thoroughbred. People may put the money on the donkey as opposed to the thoroughbred because they want to have the laugh at the jockey as opposed to the one that's crossed the line first. So there's all sorts of emotions that get involved in all these things. And, we just have to continue to discuss and try and do our best to make sure that our voices are heard.
Colin, I was just about to say, every time I hear you say donkey, I'm having a flashback to Shrek.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, Colin, the Broker Flow project, I think it was a good example of you bringing the industry together, getting the right people at the table, working through issues. The process itself was good to get people to think differently, collaborate. The Broker Flow wasn't a go forward. There wasn't a vendor. There was some friction that happened, but all that learning helped put us in a better spot moving forward. The paperless issue came up, and that experience, that process came out, and Ontario took a lead with you and your team, and Adam and Steve and some brokers across Canada jumped into that initiative. And as part of the committee, I think some great work's being done. I wonder if you could tell our audience kind of what the objectives of Go Paperless is, kind of our timelines, and give us an update of your feel of.
One of the biggest challenges that brokers have is that if we do not have a collective voice, then you have to suffer what the market delivers you. And when that happens, and certainly here in Ontario, we have 100 different insurance companies, we're going to get 100 different answers. It's just the way it works. And that creates a lot of havoc and chaos in a broker's office because you then have to do things 100 different ways. And it was very clear that if we did not do something and did not try and coordinate the response to it from an industry point of view, you'd end up with 100 different answers again. Every time an insurance company does something, they quite often don't connect with what that does to your operations. And although they're trying to do their best, they have your best interests at heart. Each change in operational practice that they implement and think is the best thing for you sends you off in a different direction, whether it be then having to reach out to every single one of your customers, for example, as we saw with Intact when they went going paperless, or you really leave it up to a choice, or whether it's even the relief measures and the different ways that people have gone about the relief measures, whether it involves a lot of your time and effort or whether they're just delivering checks. There's a lot of ability for us to just have conversations around how to do things better. Doesn't have to do it the best way, but just do things better. And that's really what the Going Paperless project is. There's a number of insurance companies that are very vocal at supporting, the development of broker networks and, where you want to go from a technology perspective. But they need to get a better understanding as to what that means. And Going Paperless is an ideal example of that, as to whether you switch over your paperless and have to go back, whether you give the brokers the choice, whether the solution is a insurance company to consumer solution as opposed to a broker to consumer solution. There's a real debate around how far do we really believe consumers are going to go paperless. The next phase of the project, as I was saying, is to understand more of the consumer requirements. Is to look at EDI standards to see if we can get some consistency. The EDI standards are not deployed consistently across the industry, to get a better understanding of that, but also to then be able to provide a direction of where brokers should be going and where the insurance companies can support them to go to get consumers more digitally interactive with their brokers and hopefully get more take up on the Going Paperless project, because it's a huge amount of paper that gets churned out from our industry. It's insane. And even personally, every time I get, from my broker, my deck pages from the insurance company, it's like 1/4 inch thick each time. So the amount of damage that does to the environment and, the money that is going out the window that doesn't necessarily have to be.
Yeah, it's great timing for this project, I would say, given, not that you want to give any credit to the pandemic, but the end consumer has been forced to become more digital, right, to interact with various services, especially financial services, obvious ones to be digital with. And climate change is, so the opposition and the desire to do something about climate change has really been gathering steam. And both of those things really support the whole paperless initiative. So I'm hopeful, and I expect that when you do get some feedback from consumers that I'll be shocked if you don't get some really positive feedback about the opportunity to go paperless.
But the interesting thing for me from doing the Going Paperless project, because this is a national project again that we're leading, is just the regional differences. It's easy, and I'll give you a bit of a laugh, but it's easy for somebody sitting in the middle of Toronto to say, well, we should all go paperless. But if you're in some of the outlying areas of Ontario or even other parts of the country where broadband doesn't even exist, I mean, it's easy for me to say that, but then doing it is something else. And the demographics as to who is or is not comfortable dealing with technology to go paperless. So it's not 100% thing. And I say I'll give you a laugh. I've had the worst time with technology. We moved house in August, still in the center of the city, but because we're in a slight dip, we've had to spend huge amount of money just getting our internet up and running properly. Not everybody has the luxury to do that kind of thing. So, it really depends on where you are, what your circumstances are, and what it is that you want.
You're absolutely right. There is no ubiquitous common answer across the board, whether you're talking about brokers or consumers, right? It's really about where is the weight of that going, right? So it's not there's no time you're going to be at 100%.
Yeah, just as the East Coast donkey.
That's my new handle. You're not losing that one.
FUAM. You said something that struck me, and it is, if you don't have a collective voice, then you have to suffer what they hand to you. So you guys have taken the initiative here to lead a project, the Paperless project, and again, thank you for that. But how do you feel about that that collective voice and it being a trained and educated and astute collective voice on a regular basis all the time? Are we strong enough there as a broker channel to have that consistency and have that voice there all the time?
If brokers could talk with one voice, you're bigger than any insurance company. You're bigger than most of the tech companies. That you could really drive the direction that you really want your own future in. So you then back into the practicalities of, well, why does that not exist today? One is that we've kind of got a bit of a fragmented association approach. We've got an association in every province. The parent, that's not really a parent, but our sister association, IBAO, is not set up to do what you're talking about. We are the only association, so the provincial associations are the only associations that have broker members. IBAO has associations as members. So it's very difficult unless you have a national association that has the brokers as members to actually speak on behalf of brokers with one voice.
Is that on the table, or does that get talked about?
Well, okay, so we have. So let me just bring this back into Ontario, okay, because we have a similar type thing with our affiliate associations. Okay, we're all separate legal entities. We're all structured differently. We all have our different boards. We all have our different finances. We all have our different operating models. If we were set up as a parent legal entity with subsidiaries, and then your parent can tell effectively the children what to do and not to do, it would work, and it would work a lot more efficiently. Should it be on the table? Absolutely. Is it on the table? I don't think so.
How do you get it on the table, Colin?
I think if we could all be party of one association with one objective, which is to operate in the best interest of broker businesses, then I think we go much further.
But Colin, I'm going to argue with you on this a little bit in the sense of, so I'm one of the Atlantic representatives on the technology committee at IBAO, and what I'm supposed to present in the framework of technology are the differences to Atlantic Canada. And the same thing from the Alberta rep and that. And guess what? We're having a real hard time finding technology-related differences across the nation. We're all talking about common issues. So when it comes to technology, let's talk about the technology voice. I know you said like it would function better if we weren't as fragmented. And there are certainly things. It's a bit of an antiquated system. You know, there were a lot more differences 20, 30, and 50 years ago, region to region. But in 2021, when it comes to technology, be it BMS's connectivity and so forth, like I've been there for 5 years, and I don't think there's been really a single issue that's come up that has been regionally an issue to us in Atlantic or to somebody like that has to do with technology. So could we collectively put together a stronger voice with respect to that?
One of the challenges that we have seen doing what we've done over the last few years is having the right people around the table. When you get the right people around the table, all sorts of amazing things can happen. So at IBAC, bearing in mind that the people that sit in most of these associations are volunteers. Unless you get the right people around the table, you're going to have a problem, because this is nothing against the people that volunteer. But the people that volunteer want to do good for the masses. Sometimes the people you need around the table are the people that have a specific skill set, that are not necessarily as interested in the masses, but are very good at what they do. So in order to get that leap ahead and to get that thing to move, you have to have different people around the table for different purposes. And that is something that we struggle with at the IBAO. And you know, you're going to see that at IBAC or any other level. The way we get around it is just through our knowledge of what people are capable of. So, you know, we employ the vets that can understand who the nags from the donkeys from the thoroughbreds are on every subject. And just because you look like a donkey in one particular subject, you could be a thoroughbred on the next one. So this is like a revolving door of different things. So when you've actually identified that there is an issue, let's just say it's technology in a bubble, that you then really need to figure out who the people are in the country that you need to have around the table to speak on behalf of the brokers. And I can bet you bottom dollar is not the people that you have sitting around the table today.
Are you asking my opinion? Because I'll tell you, I think that the IBAC Tech Committee as it's structured today compared to 5 years ago is vastly different and way improved. There's more of us. There are different people, but it's taken a lot. You know, we now have resources like Tom's been hired. We have Kim Opheim there, so it is different. It's progressing, but to me, a committee of volunteers on a national voice, a committee of volunteers that has turnover on a regular basis, like it takes you a year of quarterly meetings just to find the washroom and figure out if I should say anything or not at these meetings. And does a committee that meets 4 or 5 times a year, will they ever get anything done when they all have day jobs? So I guess my point is, if it's a national voice, a national issue, and it's something that moves really quick, like technology, should the resources be not volunteer?
Because of what we do, you can't go one way or the other 100%. So you can't totally go to paid and you can't totally go to volunteer because you get different results. The problem with going paid is to be honest, the ability to understand what goes on in the insurance industry, because it's somewhat antiquated and fragmented, is pretty tricky. And the people that you would need to bring on board to do that effectively and have that knowledge are too expensive. So you're now into a hybrid of a mix between the volunteers and the paid. And that is generally the answer. And that's what we're trying to achieve at the IBAO. We know who we need to pay to get results and we bring them in. But we then need to know the volunteers that have the credibility in the industry for the subject that we're looking at, and it varies depending on what it is, to bring them in. So for example, when we had an issue with Facility Association and the trucking deductible back in October, we did the research as to who the biggest trucking and the most influential trucking brokers were. We didn't just go to the biggest ones, the most influential ones. And they were the 4 or 5 people we tapped for the knowledge to be able to make the recommendations. So from a technology perspective, let's pick on the BMSs. We haven't picked on them yet. So if you want to be influential from a BMS perspective, you need to go to those BMS providers and ask them, who are the most influential brokers in your suite of customers that you really pay attention to and you listen to? You need to go out and grab 2 or 3 of them, get them around the table, get them on side, get them to buy into what you're trying to do so that they can then go back and influence the BMSs themselves. It's the same with insurance companies. So when we try and go through these projects, these large projects, we try and make sure that's what we do. We align up the influential brokers with the influential companies, with the influential tech companies. The challenge with the BMSs is they there's few of them. They're in more control over what happens or does not happen because there are so few of them and there's not much competition there. So they tend to be a bit of a linchpin in getting things done. But from the other perspective, getting the right people around the table is the key issue.
Well, I guess my point, Colin, is like what I'm finding now is that the technology issues don't have borders.
The biggest thing too is like, we're starting to get one more collective voice at the IBAC table. The bench strength's picked up. The issues are communicated better and stronger.
On mine, well, what's going through my head is what you saying about having the right people at the table is we've taken on probably more than any other year, and certainly on a rolling 12, a lot of big projects. Who do you wish was at the table?
Okay, so it depends on the table. So let's pick on the technology table. So there's a number of influential brokers out there that are successful or have been successful at deploying technology in the industry. So I've started to look at those. I could name names, but then, I'll start upsetting people because I haven't named the right names or otherwise. But there's probably a handful, 4 or 5, that I would pick that tend not to be at the table. Or if they're at the table, they're only very briefly at the table. Sorry, Tom.
I can interject quickly. If you don't piss somebody off during an episode of the Digital Insurance Point podcast, you're not trying hard enough. So, I recommend you go ahead and name names.
Well, I gotta tell you, we've already got one donkey. We don't need
well played.
Well played. Steve can be the donkey. Adam's got to be the nag. I've got to tell you.
I'm now Googling what a nag is.
But no, you got the guys like Sharif. There's some brokers out there, and I'm going to step out of turn here, but you got the Dalton Timmins guys that seem to have been relatively successful at deploying technology. Imagine what would happen if you actually sat down with somebody like Applied and said, okay, we get the brightest brains from all the brokerages that we can find. Let's say we've got a dozen of them around the table once a year. Let's brainstorm what the priorities should be. I'll tell you what the answer is going to be. Applied will say, well, we know the brokers. We know the ones we want to talk to. And it's the same every time we talk to an insurance company with a problem. We have our favorites. The favorites aren't the problem. It's the masses. It's everybody else that's the challenge. So they need to open up their minds to hear from different people, but we need to present credible people. And that becomes the challenge. And that's up to us to figure out who they should be. But that's the bit that's missing for me, is really the strategic discussion at a central level to get that voice. There can't possibly be anything other more powerful than 38,000 brokers speaking on the same subject.
That's really, really well said, Colin. That voice of the broker and how it can be, how can you access it, because it is so powerful. I know it's a conversation we've been having around the IBAC table relatively recently as it pertains to DX. What is the voice of the broker? Who can represent the voice of the broker? And those are some really fundamental questions.
Well, in defense of the insurers and the BMS vendors, until now, unless we try to change things, they're asking that question too, because Colin and IBAO you're having those meetings with CEOs, and you're meeting with Jeff Purdy or whoever it is. Maybe you get Taylor Rhodes in there. But then IBAC is doing it too, and then Nova Scotia is having so there isn't one voice. So the question is on their side too. Like, who are you, and like what does it look like, and who are we answering to here?
Yeah, it comes down to, it's tough. You have to get the right leaders in place. You have to get the right people in place to take you where you need to go. Um, and they become the voice. They become the point person for what has to happen. The if brokers are that keen to ensure that they can be the masters of their own destination, we're your associations, we're nobody else's. You need to tell us what you expect out of us.
How did that last vote go? You held one that was kind of a new format and some anonymity, so people felt safe.
Yeah, oh no, it was on a company issue. We had a large response, so we had pretty close to about a third of our members willing to step up and be counted on an industry issue. But that's all you see. We heard from many, many more. The difficulty that any broker has, and this is where the value of associations come in. The difficulty any broker has is if you stand up and be counted, there could potentially be ramifications for you and your business contracts, depending upon what that topic is and how strong of an opinion you want to display. So there's always safety in numbers. I am not a union guy. I don't like unions. I've never supported unions. But so I would never use an association for leverage for negotiations, for example, on contracts. Certainly we help out trying to agree terms and improve terms for both brokers and insurance companies, but we're not there to make a final decision as to what is acceptable or not acceptable. Only you can do that. It's your businesses. But there is a risk. So being an association gives us the power to have conversations representing many people, but you need to do it in a way that you understand what the desire of the people are that you represent. So that involves, again, unfortunately, process. You have to go out and you have to talk to members. You have to have principal only calls. You have to have frequent meetings. You have to have questions and answers, polls. What about this? What about that? You have to get a better understanding as to who it is that you represent.
Thinking out loud here, I said earlier that, I struggled to find geographical differences when it came to technological issues. And you had mentioned, well, we need perhaps to look at, and you called them brokers, like Johnson's and BrokerLink. And I mean, that's when you're going to get into philosophical issues about who's a broker, who's not, who should be a member. Different associations across the country have different, but like I said, there were very few, if any, geographical differences I could find with respect to technology. I think that there's very few, if any, hub to bub differences when it comes to technology as well. So if it's an applied epic issue and there's a box missing that everybody would love, it doesn't matter whether you're 400 million or 4 million. These are usually common issues, right? So perhaps the one place that the commonality could exist and create the strongest voice of all has to do with the most common issue, and that's tech.
Yep. So let me throw it back at you then. So you sit on the tech committee at IBAO. Why aren't you more successful?
Well, I think that we have been in transforming the tech committee as it exists today versus what it was 5 years ago. Like there's 10 people now there versus 4. We have full-time resources. We have, like, Tom's new. Kim was there. So we're making progress, but it's not fast enough, and it's not a strong enough voice in an environment and an ecosystem that changes weekly.
Biggest thing is we need to speak with one voice. I think that heard loud and clear. If we can channel that voice and get everybody on the same page and magnify that from the grassroots up, from the top down, we're unbeatable. But that hasn't happened because we continue to get, as Colin, people mentioned, companies go and pick their favorites to get the answer they want. Vendors pick the answer to get they want, and then we are fragmented, and they use the illusion of fragmentation to say we don't know what to do, so we won't do anything. So that's paralyzed us. I kind of feel like there's momentum where the truth's coming out. We have the right people representing us, and we're getting everything's channeled, and the processes which Colin talked about are getting built. So we're going to move from the donkey stage to the thoroughbred for results, right?
But if you sit round the table, as I've described, and you have a process and you have the right people around the table, then there should be very little to stop you achieving what you're setting out to achieve. I think the challenge that you have at the moment with IBAC, and we're very supportive of what you guys are doing there for sure, and very supportive of IBAC and what Peter's doing. The issue is you don't have the right people around the table, the resources around the table, and you don't have the process. So you've made great headway. You need to get more of these things together before you will make a bigger impact in a shorter space of time.
Good point. Not the trifecta, right? People, resources, and process are all in the works. So great observation. Everybody's trying to level up, right? Like we're trying to, unfortunately, IBAC was designed to be a political organization to handle political matters. It wasn't designed to handle technology. So that format doesn't necessarily lend itself well. So it's being adapted and molded right now as we speak.
Yeah, but it's the right place to do it. I totally agree with you. It's definitely the right place to do it. We just have to get the process, the resource, and the people together to get it done.
That's great. That's great feedback, Colin. And I'm conscious that we're running into sort of a bit of a time crunch here for folks. So I'm going to try to get us to come towards a close. So we have a process for that. And we have the right people around the table. So I'm sure we can. I'm sure we can land this puppy.
But do you have the resources? I don't know.
So I got two things for you. One is I'm going to give you a provocative question, and because you've already volunteered to be the second donkey on the thing here, I'm going to get you to. So the first question is the provocative question is, we collectively, the insurance or the broker channel, spends a fair amount of money on the BIPR, and as you mentioned, there's tens of thousands of brokers and thousands of brokerage organizations, and I'm sure everybody has got an opinion on the BIPR. Interested in knowing what your opinion on the BIPR is. Is it, for the money spent, is the channel getting value? Could that money be spent elsewhere? Should we spend more money on the BIPR? With that specific thing, give us your thought process, and then, unless one of the guys wants to react to it, then take us into close with your perspective on life, the universe, and everything.
Yeah, sure thing. And this is my personal opinion as opposed to the IBOs. But for every broker that doesn't believe in the BIPR, I could find you one that does. It is one of these very emotional subjects that it was created many years ago, decades ago, to bring brokers together. I think as an image, it could do a lot more. Value perspective always comes down to, well, what is it you're actually doing with those resources? Could you create more value from using those particular resources elsewhere? For the masses, I believe you probably could. For the BIPR, I think you could do different things with it, to be honest, which if you spent the same amount of money, you'll get more value out of. But again, I am not in control of that. That is an IBAC symbol. But as you'll see throughout all of the brokerages, certainly in Ontario, some do support it wholeheartedly, and some do not. I'm not necessarily sure what it is being used for right now is of the greatest benefit to those brokers that do not use it. And that just is a question as to, well, what could you do with it and what should you be doing with it to get them to buy into it? And, I'd love to have that discussion, but that'll probably take us an hour and a half as well.
Yeah. And you know what, Colin, that's exactly what we're looking for is what is your view, right? We're not looking for the IBAO's stance or what have you. It's just you as, somebody who's been in the industry for a long time, who's got a grasp on the broker channel, got a grasp on consumer needs and insurer needs. You're one of the few who probably sees all those things. What is your personal perspective?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it definitely I'd definitely put on something, the list to look at for sure.
All right, guys, anybody want to react to that, or can we let Colin get into his closing Jimmy Kimmel monologue here?
Yeah, no, I agree. Monologue away.
Yeah, I love the broker network. I wholly support the broker network. I truly believe that we can do a collective, much better job collectively, getting 38,000 voices around a table to do what we need to do. We don't do it well. We need to do it better. I'm definitely up for the challenge in trying to figure that out. I love to see brokers succeed. I love to see insurance companies succeed from the back of brokers. I love to see technology succeed on the back of brokers, but it's on the back of brokers. Like, you guys have to succeed. I think you form an incredible part of our economy and our ecological system. And we need to figure out how to strengthen that and continue to move that forward.
Awesome. And I hope that that's coming from the person who is president of one of the biggest association in Canada. I am super enthused that that's your passion. I mean, that says to me that IBAO is being well shepherded. I do have one last question for you. Did you get your delivery of Garrisons? You did. Awesome. All right. So big shout out to Garrisons and their number one supporter, Steve, out there in Nova Scotia.
That's
so, number two supporter there, and Adam.
Yeah.
I'm just waiting for mine. I have it in the stick, so I haven't got mine. Maybe tomorrow.
Jeff gets great internet, but bad beer delivery. Colin, I very much appreciate your time on the Digital Insurance Pint podcast, and wish you all the success in the future, and get that Go Paperless project done.
We will. We'll do much more than that.
Is retention important to your brokerage? Of course it is. That's why at IFS, we have a cancellation prevention process. Want more details? Give us a call. I know you don't always use a premium finance company, but when you do, you should use IFS. Cheers.